If we can just look back at your debate with Flint Dibble
Mm.
on Joe Rogan Experience, what are some takeaways from that? What have you learned? Maybe what are some things you like about Flint? You said that he's one of your big critics, but what do you like about his ideas, and what were you maybe bothered by?
First of all, just very recently, and it can be found on my YouTube channel, and it's signaled on my website, I have made a video, runs about an hour, which looks at a series of statements that Flint made during the debate, which I was not prepared to answer. And it turns out that some of those statements are not correct. The notion, for example, that there were 3 million shipwrecks that have been mapped. Flint actually uses the word mapped, 3 million shipwrecks that have been mapped at one point in the debate. And I've put that clip into the video that I brought out. That is not a fact. That is an estimate, a UNESCO estimate. And actually in the small print on one of the slides that he has on the screen, you can see the word estimate, but he never expresses that word out loud. So those who are listening to the podcast rather than watching it wouldn't even have a chance to see that. And I, sitting there in the studio, didn't see that word estimate either. And I didn't know that. I thought, my God, Flint has a point here. If there have been 3 million shipwrecks found and mapped, if that's the case, the absence of any shipwreck from a lost civilization of the Ice Age is a problem. But then I discovered that it isn't 3 million shipwrecks that have been mapped. It's much, much less than that. And maybe it's 250,000. Still a large number, but most of them from the last 1,000 years. And unfortunately, what Flint didn't go into, and perhaps he should have shared with the audience, and again, I go into this in the video, is that there is indisputable evidence that human beings were seafarers as much as 50 or 60,000 years ago. The peopling of Australia involved a relatively short 90 kilometers, 100-kilometer ocean voyage, but nevertheless, it was an ocean voyage, and it must have involved a large enough number of people to create a permanent population that wouldn't go extinct. The settlement of Cyprus is the same thing. It was always an island, even during the Ice Age. And no ships have survived that speak to the settlement of Australia, and no ships have survived that speak to the settlement of Cyprus either. But that doesn't mean that thing didn't happen.
Yeah, I should just linger on this, because for me, it was the shipwrecks thing was convincing. And then looking back, first of all, watching your video, but also just realizing the peopling of Australia part. That's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
50,000 years ago. Just imagine being the person standing on the shore, looking out into the ocean, standing on the shore of a harsh environment, looking out to the ocean of an even harsher environment, and deciding that, you know what, I'm going to go towards near certain death.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't
explore.
know what's on the other side of that water. You can't see 90 kilometers.
Humans did it.
Yeah.
Man, I love
and again,
humans so much.
It's that urge to explore.
Yeah.
And I suggest that it probably began with a few pioneers who made the journey there and back. They ventured into the water. They definitely had boats. And lo and behold, after a 2 or 3 day voyage, they ended up on a coastline. You're an individual. You've got by relatively straightforward island hopping where each island is within sight of each other as far as Timor. And when you get to Timor, suddenly you can't island hop anymore. There's an expansive ocean that you can't see across. But that urge to explore, that curiosity that is central to the human condition, would undoubtedly have led some adventurous individuals to want to find out more and even be willing to risk their lives. And that first reconnoitering of what lay beyond that strait would have undoubtedly been undertaken by very few individuals, not enough to create a permanent population in Australia. But when they came back with the good news that there's a whole land there, that's the land that was in it that geographers call Sahul, which just as Sunda was the Ice Age Indonesian and Malaysian peninsula all joined together into one landmass. So Sahul was New Guinea joined to Australia. So they would have made landfall in New Guinea. And then they think, well, here is this vast, open, incredible land. We need to bring more people here. And that would have involved larger craft. You need to bring people with resources, and you need to bring enough of them both men and women, in order to produce a population that will not rapidly become extinct. And it's the same in Cyprus. There, the detailed work that's been done suggests very strongly that we're looking at planned migrations of groups of people in excess of 1,000 at a time, bringing animals with them. And this certainly would have involved multiple boats, and boats of a significant size.
And there's no archaeological evidence of those boats?
None whatsoever. The oldest boat that's ever been found in the world is the Dokos shipwreck off Greece, which is around 5,000 years old, if I recall correctly.
So everything that makes a boat is lost to time?
Yes, boats can be preserved under certain circumstances. There's a wreck at the bottom of the Black Sea, almost 2 miles deep. I didn't know the Black Sea was that deep, but there's a wreck, and there's no oxygen down there. That is more than 2,000 years old and is still in pretty much perfect condition. But in other conditions, the structure of the ship evaporates. Sometimes what you're left with is the cargo of the ship, and you could say there was a ship that sank here, but the ship itself has gone. The fact is, we know that our ancestors were seafarers as much as 50,000 years ago, and no ship has survived to testify to that, yet we accept that they were.
Do you think one day we'll find a ship that's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years old?
It's not impossible. I think it's quite unlikely, given the very thin survival of ships the further back you go in time, with the oldest, as I say, being about 6,000 years old now. And then the other thing to take into account is the Younger Dryas event itself, and the cataclysmic circumstances of that event, and the roiling of the seas that would have taken place then. How much would have survived in a boat accident at that time would have survived for thousands of years afterwards? I'm not sure, but I don't give up hope. It's possible.
So that's back to the 3 million shipwrecks.
Yeah.
So what's your takeaway from that debate?
Well, my takeaway from that debate is that I should have been better prepared, and I should have been less angry. I have to say that Flint had really disturbed me with these constant, snide, not quite exact references to racism and white supremacism in my work. I detest such things, and to have those labels stuck on me. He's always avoided taking direct responsibility, pretty much always avoided. There's one example that I include in the video I've made where he really hasn't successfully avoided it. But in most cases, he's trying to say that I rely on sources that were racist, but that he's not saying that I myself am a racist. But the end result of those statements is that people all around the world came to the conclusion that Graham Hancock is a racist and a white supremacist. And that really got under my skin, and it really upset me. And I felt angry about it. And I felt that I was there to defend Ancient Apocalypse Season 1, whereas in fact what I was there to do was to listen to a series of lectures where an archaeologist tells me what archaeologists have found, and that somehow I'm to deduce that from what they have found, they're not going to find anything else. At least not anything to do with the lost civilization.
Listen, I feel you. I've seen the intensity of the attacks, and the whole racism label is the one that can get under your skin. And it's a toolbox that's been prevalent over the past, let's say, decade, maybe a little bit more, as a method of cancellation. Yeah. When a person is the opposite of racist, very often it's kind of hilarious to watch, but it can get under your skin, especially when you have certain dynamics that happen on the internet where it seeps into a Wikipedia page, and then other people read that Wikipedia page, and you get to hear it from like friends. Oh, I didn't know you're whatever. And you realize that Wikipedia description of who you are actually has a lot of power, not by people that know you well, but by people that just kind of are learning about you for the first time.
Definitely.
And they can really start to annoy you and get under your skin when the people are kind of indirectly injecting, they're writing articles about you. They can then be cited by Wikipedia. Yeah. It can really bother a person who is actually trying to do good science or just trying to inspire people with different ideas.
I felt that my work was being deliberately misrepresented, and I felt that I, as a human being, was being insulted and wronged in ways that are deeply hurtful. My wife and I have 6 children between us, and we have 9 grandchildren. And of those 9 grandchildren, 7 are of mixed race. And this is my family. And these are kids who are going to grow up and read Wikipedia and learn from reading Wikipedia that grandpa was some kind of racist. This is a personal issue for me. And I'm afraid I carried that personal anger into the debate, and it made me less effective than I should have been. But ultimately, I do want to pay tribute to Flint. He is an excellent debater. He's got a very sharp mind. He's a very clever man, and he's very fast on his feet. And I recognize that. I was definitely up against a superior debater in that debate. I'm not sure that I have those debating skills, and I certainly didn't have them on that particular day. I also admire about Flint something else, which is that he was willing to be there. Most archaeologists don't want to talk to me at all. They want to insult me from the sidelines. They want to make sure that Wikipedia keeps on calling me a pseudo-archaeologist or a purveyor of pseudo-archaeological theories. They want to make sure that the hints of racism are there, but they actually don't want to sit down and confront me. At least Flint was willing to do that, and I'm grateful to him for that. And I think in that sense, it is an important encounter between people with, let's say, an alternative view of history and those with the very much mainstream view of history that archaeology gives us. And he's also a very determined character. He doesn't give up. So all of those things about him I admire and respect. But I think he fought dirty during the debate, and I've said exactly why in this video that I now have up on YouTube.